All right, everyone, welcome back to the Upset Podcast. We are here yet another week, ready to discuss a very important topic. I'm going to welcome my fellow upsetters here at this time. What's up, everyone?
Hey,
Back
hey,
again. Back
Good to
again.
see you all.
Look at GP. All right. Go ahead, boy.
Yes, he's getting close.
Yeah, so this month we're wrapping up April. And for those who may not be aware, April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month. And we definitely felt as a team that this was a topic that we needed to touch on because we recognize how serious it is and how much it needs to be addressed. So, Patrick, start us off.
Yeah, so child abuse, and there's so many different things that so many different aspects that we could discuss about child abuse. And one of the things that why I wanted to put it out here is that now that we're here with the COVID situation that we're dealing with, many times COVID, based on the abuse, it's in school. We close down schools, primary schools and secondary schools. Those are the times when the teachers or the social workers had the opportunity of looking at what's going on with the way you dress, or if your hair is unkept, if you're sleeping through the day. Those are some of the things that they look at. But COVID being here and being on Zoom and doing it virtually, it has had a significant drop in reports of what's actually going on in the house. And even if it's not the house, everybody, it also could be the community. It could be your family that's around. And I think that what I wanted to open to us today to discuss is that it could be happening, or maybe there's certain things that we have to look at to see if we can help along. Those are the type of directions that I want to go into. Let me just add a little caveat to that. When there's snow days, we would be happy. There's snow days. We don't have to go to school, or we don't have to work, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't think about those who are in our public school system or some of our systems that they eat breakfast there, or they eat lunch there, et cetera. So the reason why I wanted to bring that in is just to show that it helps for them to go to school and school to be open, because it'll give them the opportunity to be able to detect what it is that's happening or what's going on. So upsetters, I don't want to upset anybody, but wow. That's what I want to start off with: COVID-19 and dealing with dealing with abuse in the homes, neighborhood, communities, etc. Come on, help me.
Well, I'd like to ask a question to everyone first. How would we define abuse?
Wow. There's a whole lot that came up with it as far as the abuse was concerned. We looked at let's start off with just neglect in the beginning. We could start off with just simple neglect. Not eating, that's abuse. Not being able to get rest, get the rest that you need, that's still abuse when we look at it. More than looking at a black eye or a Penny from Good Times, an iron burn, or something of that nature. Y'all too young to know about that.
But even attention. I mean, sometimes kids are in homes and no one's acknowledging that they even exist. And for children, that's an important part of their development.
What about verbal abuse?
Oh, absolutely.
Calling them names,
absolutely,
being disrespectful and just nasty toward
yelling
them.
at them. Sure. Yeah. And in the context of COVID has brought on several more dynamics about how families operate at home under the stresses of being locked down, under the stressors of losing jobs, or even working at home. Some folk were grateful that I can work at home, but they didn't take in consideration having to deal with their children at the same time.
Right.
And tempers flare, patience run thin. And so I think in the context of COVID, it has really brought out a lot of society's ills from the first place. Some people didn't perhaps realize that they were such terrible parents until COVID.
Well put,
we put a magnifying glass. Yes. So
yeah. And I'll tell you, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people have, that cared about how they parent, that probably reached out and said, hey, I need to talk to someone just to make sure that I'm not abusing my child, Sometimes you can abuse a child and not characterize it as abuse. We may characterize it as discipline, and there's definitely a difference. And so I think what Tali was suggesting, that we really need to look at the various forms of child abuse. Because there are some people that don't consider what they do to their children as abuse.
Sure.
Mhm.
You're right
That's
about
true.
that. You're right.
Discipline.
Because some people function in dysfunction all the time, and so they don't call
Yeah.
it what it is. It's just their norm.
Can you imagine what it's like to get one of these new math problems? I'm going to call it new math
Oh, I
problems.
can't imagine. I live it.
I hear. I mean, just to be able to sit there and say to yourself, "Hold on a second, wait a minute. There's even another planet." From the time that we were growing up,
Right.
and I think the biggest frustration of it is how to divide the time, how to and to see them frustrated. I'm sure they're frustrated, and then we don't know how to deal with their frustration. And I think it's the hard part about it is that here's the thing: when we look at abuse, we automatically think of like what the television says. You take these kids and you take them out of school. I mean, you take them and you put them in a foster care, or you put them somewhere else. It doesn't necessarily mean that. The education system can meet with the parents and help the parents deal with the situation while still being at home. It's not necessarily something as invasive as taking the child out. It could be a situation where you say to the parents, hey, give yourself some time, some type of counseling type thing for them to be able to deal with.
Strategies.
Yeah, some strategies for them to be able to deal with. So I don't look at the abuse. When we see this word abuse, man, it just takes us left wing immediately. When the truth is that we have to learn how to cope. Parents also have to learn how to cope in COVID times, because we're working too, and there's a lot of frustrations on top of that also. So I think it comes from difference. Neglect is one of them. Yes. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I spent, and I don't know if any of you guys knew this. I spent 20 years as a parenting educator, working for one of the leading authorities in Pennsylvania, a group called Parents Incorporated. And defining abuse was tough, because most people think abuse is something that bad parents do, and a lot of good parents abuse. And sometimes they say it's when you hit your child, and like we just discussed, sometimes abuse is not hitting your child or doing anything else. You just neglect them. And so we started looking at abuse as a misdirected use of power and authority that results in damage to a child.
There you go.
Misdirected. So whether you're doing something or not doing something, that it results in damage to a child. And sometimes people don't know. I mean, very indulgent parents are abusing their children by failing to provide discipline. Very moral parents are abusing their children by forcing them. You will mind me. Everybody knows that a black parent tell you in a minute, I brought you in this world, I take you out.
And that's a threat right there.
Yeah.
Can I do something really crazy for you? Just help me out. And I'm really going for help with this. You got kids who are in school. They're in school, even if it's 4 hours a day virtually, it's still a lot of time to be virtually on.
Yeah.
And then here I am as a Pathfinder leader, as a youth leader, expecting them to do the same thing that they have been doing. No, you got to think about this, right? The same thing that they've been doing all week long. We're doing the same type of learning and the same, but it's all for God, and I guess that's what makes it better. But I think I'm feeling bad about this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I think there's a bit of abuse to put them in a situation where they're going through the same thing, which is not an elective to some parents. We say you have to do it. I mean, where do they get the freedom to be able to run outside? Where do they get the freedom to say, I need to enjoy the Sabbath without having to get on Zoom, et cetera, et cetera? So I'm starting to wake up also on that side. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You're gonna get yourself in trouble.
Free the
Pathfinders are gonna play this clip for their parents, and there's gonna be a sharp decline in Pathfinder.
I meant adventurers.
Back to that definition of abuse, Nick. You brought up a good point about your association with a group who that was the focus on parenting. The question I have is that I know that different states have different rules and regulations as to what abuse is. I know Florida is very tough. Sometimes, I've heard stories where people would report parents spanking their kids in a supermarket, and the police come and they characterize this as abuse, and sometimes that child is taken out of their home.
Sure.
I think that's overreaction in a lot of cases, but I mean, certain states and cities and municipalities define abuse differently. So how do we reckon with that? Because if you see something, say something, sometimes that can be very helpful for the safety of the child, but that could also break up a family unintentionally. So how do you deal with that?
Charles, in our neighborhood where we grew up, that was just called Thursday. I mean, but nowadays, look, we shared this in our pre-discussions. I mean, the Bible gives an example in Deuteronomy 21, where it says, if a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his parents, that ultimately you bring that child before the elders of the city, you make the accusation, and they take that kid and they throw him down and they stone them to death.
Right.
Now that clearly nowadays would be considered abuse.
Sure.
The example of the children,
murder, Nick.
Yeah, be like murder. Yeah.
Murder.
Hey, look, talk to the one who wrote Deuteronomy. But later on, you see in the story of Elisha in 2 Kings chapter 2, where some kids start mocking him. They didn't hit him. They're not even his children. They're mocking him, and the Bible says Elisha, go up, thou bald head, go up. They said, to
easy,
him.
Careful. Go ahead, careful.
Now, of course, biblically, bald head may have been white hair. So at that time, like the bald eagle, but Elisha turns around and he doesn't say, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. He calls down a curse from heaven, and here comes Smokey and the 3 refugees from Goldilocks, and they tear those children a new one.
That's right.
Now the people read that in the Bible and they say, see, whatever it takes to make your children mine. I mean, good parents, they see what it takes to make your children mine.
Sure.
And Tasha won't say it, but she got that look that'll say, look, child, I brought you in this world. So how do we help good parents? To start there, how do we help good parents to understand the difference of abuse, that when they are misusing and abusing their powers and leading to damage to their children? How do we help them?
Well, that's very complex. I think that's a very complex question because, a lot of people chastise their children the way they were chastised.
Yeah.
They would say things like, they come home from grandmother's house and they'd be all, pouting. And what happened? Well, grandmother spanked me. Well, grandmother spanked me too. That's what happens when you're bad.
What did you do? What you do? Then you tell them, and then you get another one.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So I think parenting is so important. I know with my boys, I used to call Jackie Winston. You remember Jackie? That was one of her specialties.
We worked in the same agency.
Great.
Oh, there you go.
And there are times I'd call Jackie because we were good friends. And, it's right after I yelled at my kid or I chastised them. And then I pick up the phone. Did I
think I messed up.
Yeah, I think I messed up.
Did I just turn them into criminals?
Right. And I'd ask Jackie, she said, well, what did you do? And then I'd say, she said, I think you're overreacting. I mean, try this approach next time, try that approach next time. But, you weren't terrible. It's just, so I felt like I had to be mindful of how I chastised, how I disciplined my children. I was not a person.
Just on you listening? Are you listening?
I'm listening very carefully.
I'm just listening.
And in fact, I did a project for her with the agency. We did a video or two about parenting, how parents react to children who do certain things. It's kind of like one of those videos that have you think ahead, be one step ahead of your kid. If you find out that they do something, you can almost expect them to react a certain way. So what do? Do you react to their reaction, or do you think ahead and say, okay, I knew that was going to happen, so this is how I'm going to handle it? But that takes a little thought process and some planning. A lot of times we don't have time to do that. Your kid does something ridiculous and you react immediately. Sometimes you feel that you overreact, and it can end up being abusive. May not be our intent initially, but it can end up being abusive. And I just think that parents need to be a little more cognizant about, how they need to approach disciplining their children so it doesn't become abuse.
But Chuck, I also think that we need to do some rewiring. Because being in the COVID situation, it's not, something has changed. Something has changed even in being where we are. I'm looking at a parent who has to work from home. Remember now, we have not even touched a parent who has lost their job because of COVID, who have to stay on top of the computer, who have to stay on top of having an internet system, to stay on top of their schoolwork, and yet half the day have to figure out where I'm going to get the next meal from, or where this is going to come from. I just think that there needs to be a rewiring, even in the way we deal with ministry. There needs to be a rewiring. You have to be able to recognize that a kid who was going to school from 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 7 hours, having them sit down for 7 hours is not going to work. I'm not saying they do sit down for 7 hours, but even you have to recognize just 3 hours even is even an overkill. We do the same thing for video games, right? We don't want our kids sitting down playing video games for 4 hours straight, but yet we have them stare. We're gonna have from COVID. We're gonna have a lot of kids with eye problems. We're gonna have a lot of kids with what do you call it, with visual problems. But here's what I wanted to get back to, Chuck. It's to rewire our thinking. It's to rewire that it's not the same type of attitude that we should have with our children during this time. There needs to be breaks, and I think parents need to take the time to be intentional about their breaks and spend time with them during that, to ease them off of this virtual world. Virtual reality is bringing on a different type of reality that can have a parent say to themselves, I didn't learn that way. That math is not even the way we've done that math. Holding a pencil and now having to type something in with your QWERTY keyboard are two different things. And it builds a level of frustration in us where we now have to be rewired, not just for school and our kids, but for Sabbath school and our children, children's ministries and our children, Pathfinders, Adventurers, whatever it is that we do. The fun and games have even changed. The games that we have virtually has even changed. So we have to be rewired. That's what I look at, rewiring.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that too, thinking about what Charles was saying about just being cognizant of what you're doing, what you're saying. I think what I do for myself is I have to take myself out of parent mode sometimes, and I have to go back to my childhood. And I look at things that may have impacted who I am, the damage that I may have experienced, not necessarily from my parents, but maybe in an environment that I was in. And I say to myself, wow, because I was in that environment, this is why I feel this way, or this is why I have this damage today. And so I take that same thought process and go back to my children and look at, am I creating an environment for them where they won't grow up with this same damage? Am I pouring into them? Am I building their self-esteem? Am I too stern? Am I yelling too much? Do they think people who love them yell at them? Do they think people who love them make them go to Sabbath school? Like you said.
Latasha, do you yell? I just want to know. Do you yell?
Oh, there have been times when I raise my voice. And,
I didn't say that. I didn't ask you that. Raising your voice is to, she's gonna make sure social workers don't come to our house. I'm saying
no. In general, I don't like to yell, but I will raise my voice. But at the same time, one of the things I try to do is talk to my children about why I'm upset. Like, I don't let them just feel like mommy's just angry. After I've calmed down, I mean, of course you should do it before, I have that discussion with them because I don't want them to I don't want them to get used to abuse, even if it's from, even if it's from me. I don't want them to go other places
right.
and feel like this is okay.
That's right.
And so I think me going back into my childhood and what I would have wanted to hear if I were their age and what would make me feel safe, I have to make sure I'm creating that same environment. And
I think we lost her.
Yeah,
Go
we lost her
ahead.
momentarily.
no, it's good. I was just
Hey,
Okay.
GP,
While we got that
Did you kick
pause,
the wire out?
I don't know why she did that just now. I think she
the
she
Lord
was,
stopped
was
her.
sensitive.
yeah, she was
sensitive.
starting to yell. I think that's what it was. She's starting to yell.
But let me get you guys away from the high flung consideration and ask a very basic question that many parents want to ask that Justin will probably be asking in another year and a half: to spank or not to spank? And I remember growing up, I would hear about, especially white children would talk about getting a spanking. I said, I would love to go to a house where they spank.
Yeah, me
because
too.
my parents whoop you.
Yeah.
You know?
And Caribbeans say beat, right?
Yeah, beat
so
you,
I mean, and that.
Yeah. I mean, and they would say it in no uncertain terms. I mean, you forget about violence on TV. In a black neighborhood, there was nothing more violent than an angry mother in the house. My mother would say, "Yeah, a boy will beat the black off you," and I'm thinking, in 5 minutes, I'm going to be clear and in pain, right? Or I will beat you into next week, and I'm like, well, God knows this week ain't doing me well. So,
Right.
so do we hit our children? Is that a part of acceptable child discipline? Yes or no?
You talking about Bible, or you talking about what the new book says?
I'm just saying. I mean, what do we recommend? We've got somebody who's about to become a parent. Is it acceptable to hit your children as an act of discipline? And let me throw a little Bible at you just for the joy of it. It says, "Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die. If you strike him with the rod, you will save his soul from the grave."
All right.
Now I leave the question with you. I'm going to go now.
So explain that to your child after you have left
whelps
the size of a ruler, right?
Learn this term. It is going to hurt you more than it hurt you.
Yeah.
And GP,
they don't buy that anymore.
GP, listen. No, they're not going to buy that. You're right, Tasha. But GP, you are going to hurt more.
Really?
You're going to hurt. Yeah, they're not going to buy that story, but it is true.
Patrick, you're saying that hitting a child is acceptable discipline.
Hold on. Keep where you are. No, I'm going to tell you right now. All right. So let me tell you what it is. The truth is that let me tell you something. I brought my sons on a little thing that we do, and people were asking them, "Hey, did your dad spank you or whatever?" I was embarrassed to know that my daughter still remembers when I spanked her for no reason.
I remember.
Right. And I mean, and the thing about it is that she could remember when she has done something wrong and I got her.
Right.
But the thing that she remembers the most is when I spanked her for no reason. I mean, for that to come at the top of your head like that, it says something. Those are the reasons why I understand psychologists now, and I understand therapists now of not putting the rod down, because those are the reasons why we don't do it. Because you make a mistake like that actually scars the child. You understand what I mean? And that goes out into the future. I say it this way. If my parents did not put it on me, Gary and Paul, we would be wearing orange with county on the back or something of that nature. We needed it, right? Whereas, this is crazy, guys. Listen to this. The therapist, my son is autistic, and they said that if we had not trained him like we were training the other ones, he would not be as high functioning as where he is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine? So if we had babied him, knowing that because we didn't know, if we had known that he was autistic, then we would have babied him to the point where he could have been rude, etc., etc. But no, we treated him just like we treated the others. Now, do I feel guilty for that? That's another show. Boy, I used to put it on him.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be balance.
Sure.
Pat, you offered balance for your children. If you if you disciplined them physically, there was also love involved. There are some kids who get disciplined physically, and and the hatred continues beyond the spanking.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There are parents. I've had, my grandmother used to, when she had to watch us, and my parents had to work, she would spank us, but shortly after that, she would hug us and talk to us and let us know that, grandma's not some evil woman that, seeks pleasure in
He said, tell that to the
spanking
woman who just whooped me.
right, right. But I think as long as there's balance, and you can get excessive with physical
Yeah.
spanking. I've heard and seen some horrific situations where children were physically damaged from a spanking.
Wow.
Yeah.
It wasn't a spanking; it was actually a beating, to the extent that if and here again we talk about the schools. If a child comes to school and they've got terrible scars or welts on them, the teacher says, "Well, where'd you get that?" And they say, "Well, my daddy spanked me last night." Red flag goes up.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it needs to be measured.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. A lot of times, particularly in Black homes, spanking is the instinct. That's the first thing you go to. Something goes wrong, they need a beating. But I think you have to know your children. I definitely don't think spanking or beating should be your first result. I mean, I think particularly with my children, I've found that talking to them about certain things, I get better long-term results. Because for some people, some children, they can endure spanking and then they just go about the business and do it again.
You mean like the grandbrothers, or which one?
Yeah, exactly. Just like you guys. But other children, when they understand why it's wrong, why if you do this, this is what's going to happen next, they tend not to do it. So I do think when they're young and they're hard to reason with, a light spanking might help them understand, oh, that means no, when they can't. But when they're old enough to have dialogue and understand what you're saying, I think that should be your first result. I think that's my approach.
Latasha,
that takes some forethought.
That's right.
I mean,
That's exactly
when
right.
you are
Discipline.
Yep.
and when
for
you are
you.
starting a family and you're becoming a parent, you really do have to be cognizant of. You have to think ahead of time, and I'm saying this based on experience. What would your reaction be if you're trying to discipline your child?
Yeah.
Do you have a first option, second option, third option? Does the spanking be the last option under certain circumstances? I mean, I really think it needs to be planned out. Even when kids catch you by surprise, you should automatically respond with, okay, that infraction was egregious enough for me to take this action versus another action. And I know sometimes parents aren't thinking that fast on their feet. They just want their kid to stop. And if they don't, they get it. They get the nuke option, So
Yeah, right. I think what Latasha said,
The nuke option.
The nuke option, like boom. I think what I've learned the most now, if I could do it all over again, I would have done a lot more talking.
Yeah.
absolutely.
And the truth is that we can change, because there's a fine line between discipline and abuse. And I know that's where we started off this conversation. I know Tally brought us into spankings and beatings, and it's true, but it has to start somewhere, because it's what you know. It's what you know. There's some reason I could not. I've spanked my daughter less, but she didn't need as the other ones, you know what I mean? So you have to, but I remember the biggest turnaround for me is when my dad did not spank me, but told me that he's disappointed in me. And I think that did the most, I'm using it in a good term, that did the most damage, or I should say that did the most for me to turn around. That's where it was, because if you spank me, the pain goes away in the next whichever, depending on which belt they use, brownie or branchy or whatever the one they use. But to tell you that they're disappointed, when you tell a child that now, that I'm disappointed, they almost take that to be, I'm not your friend. As a kid, I'm saying, as a kid.
Right.
And that's the reason why love, Chuck, that you were just talking about, the reason why love is it's a big deal, even with our teachers, our parents, our Sabbath school teachers, etc. The reason why love is what you deal with is because if you're disappointed when somebody loves you, or if you're disappointed, if you disappoint them, I mean, you get that sting. You understand what I'm saying? You get that sting. And I think, GP, when your daughter knows that that's daddy's hands, and daddy's hands is used for hugging, dad's hands is used for blessings, but now dad's hands, and we're not talking about all of this. Dad's hands is for pain. They got to find where that love is in, as far as where that pain is in that love. They have to find that. So it can't be pain all the time. It has to be hugs. It got to be holding. It's got to be, especially for girls and dads. We need to have our own show on girls and dads, man. That's yeah.
So look, just listening to you, I mean, and I'm learning, and that is, so abuse being the misuse of force and authority, or power and authority, in a way that damages. It seems to be also what makes the abuse even more damaging is when it isn't connected to a loving administration. And then another thing that can be added to it is because the idea of discipline is to teach a person how to follow, how to do right, how to walk the right way.
Right.
So when force or authority or power is used in a way that is not corrective, I'm not trying to correct you, I'm just trying to demonstrate my anger.
Right.
Then it becomes abusive. It's I'm not. It's not because I don't want you to run in the street. It's because you tick me off so bad. I want you to hurt because you have discomforted me.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
That's true.
So how
Or
do we
even
help
that's
parents
the way
like that?
I was raised, and I turned out all right. I hear people say that, but
I heard
I don't know,
somebody
that's
say,
making up.
anybody who ever says that ain't all right.
exactly.
Nick T, I was just about to say that.
Yep.
She was like, "Oh, I turned out all right."
I mean, they always said, look, my parents
I'm
used to
fine.
give me drugs and alcohol, and I turned
Yeah.
out. And you realize that they're not all right. I mean,
Right.
It's funny. It's funny you say that. You got to look at everybody's life, with a different eye. The perspective is different. You can't only look at it from yours. There's no way in the world, Tally, that your parents could grow me and my brothers. I mean, we were constantly looking for something to do that was I don't know, left wing. But that was bad. The word is bad, right? But
you obviously don't know a lot about me. Please continue. Let's keep it like that.
But here's the thing that I don't want to take away from our kids. And please, moderator, we're gonna probably need to come back to this, because the reason why I say that is because I think at a certain time my parents said to me, go work with your uncle. Go work with your uncle. They were so frustrated at what was happening that they realized that there's something ingenious, or there's something going on in your kid's life, GP, that you don't want to beat that out of them, or you don't want to discipline.
Want to channel it.
Yeah, you want to find a way to channel it in the right way.
I think Patrick is saying he was an evil genius. I think that's the point he's making.
Go ahead and do the laugh.
Continue.
Go ahead and do the laugh, Nick. Go ahead.
Well, I this may sound strange, but my father disciplined us very violently. A lot of pain, and I mean serious pain that lasted several days. He was very violent, and this is what I learned from my father: how not to be him.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. And we ought to be able to turn around and say thank you, because Chuck, if we look at people who have been in bad, you've seen your parents in bad marriages, you don't have to walk away from that saying, I gotta have a bad marriage. You can walk away from that saying, this is what I won't do. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
This is how I will talk to my children, etc.
Right.
My dad was harsh. My dad was really harsh. And it's just recently, like 5 years ago, he sat us all down and apologized. He was like,
wow,
that's
big.
But
we have to acknowledge something. Charles is the exception. Most kids don't survive that.
Oh yes,
Right.
you're right. You're right.
Right.
They don't
You're right.
survive that.
You're
And
right.
and you know, a parent being abusive, and then you know the parent will justify the abuse by saying,
Mhm.
you make me so mad.
Yeah.
You know, and the
Right.
child learns to justify the abuse and grows up
Mhm.
to become a justifier. And we have to break this vicious cycle. And the first way to do it is to extend an understanding to abusive parents that do not label them beyond redemption. And for example, if a child is an abuse, if a parent is an abuser now, he gets arrested. And as or his dog will bark. You never know. But you know, a child, a parent now is afraid to admit I've got a problem because he doesn't want to get arrested. And so we
Sure.
have to make a pathway for parents to know, look, we understand you love your child. We understand you're doing the best you can. And there's room for you to grow. We're not going to label you, you know. Just my thought.
No, I agree. I totally
Yeah,
agree.
it's important for parents to give a lot of thought, even those that have, you know, they have young children now, they've been parenting for a few years, they think they've got it under control. It still does take some intentionality to think ahead, to, you know, to learn how to react and deal with, you know, because you never know what your kids will come home with. You'll never know. I mean, what do you react? Say you have a teenage son. How do you react if someday, you know, your kid is brought home by the county police? What do you do?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to really kind of think ahead of that, you know, because anything can happen out there in the street. And yeah, so I've had to do a lot of that. And to the point, and I go back to the discipline that my father gave me, the few times that I've had to spank my sons when they were very young, it was traumatic for me because it reminded me
Wow.
of the spankings that I got. And I did not want to impose that level of hurt on them because I didn't have my act together in advance. It's not to say they didn't deserve to get a little attention I called it getting their attention. But yeah, but I'll tell you, it's just strange. I don't know. It just happened that way, that I just learned what not to do to my children.
Wow. Well, what do you wish would have happened? I mean, what could have helped your dad, Charles, from just as a child, just looking on? What could have possibly been helpful for your father?
Well, I realized as I became an adult, one of the major hindrances that he had, that he was an alcoholic.
Okay.
And I mean major. I mean, he big league, you know, like 1 every day, 2 every day kind of thing. And I'm sure that in job, you know, stressors had a lot to do with it. You know, of course, when I was young and was, you know, inflicted with his fury, I wasn't thinking on those levels. But as I got older, I began to realize that, you know, not to make excuses for him, but I'm sure that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah. Chuck, what I wanted to add on to this piece though is alcoholic, workaholic. I've found that I was most and again, I don't want to pour cold water on the word abuse, but I found that I was abusive verbally or when you look back at it, when you had the high stress of work. And you couldn't take it out on them at work, but you could take it out on them because they are your kid, you know. So it's not just alcohol, you know what I mean? Where we have to be careful of is our frustrations at work. We bring it home and know that I can do what I want with these 3 kids. This is my, you know, and you're frustrated towards them. Those are the type of things I want to talk to parents about, to say, hey, we ought to be careful that just because we're the boss at home, or just because, you know, we're the priest of our home, you know, we're required to discipline and love more than discipline the way we wanted to discipline somebody else at work, or we wanted to, you know, and we have to be careful of that.
You shouldn't let your children be your dumping ground. You know, you don't realize how much you can crush a child's spirit. You know, they may be on their way to tell you something exciting that happened in their day, and then you yell at them, and that takes, you know, that's so crushing. So these are the types of things that we have to be cognizant of, because sometimes we think, oh, I never lay a hand on my child. Yet your words cut
Verbally.
through them.
Right.
I would like to share this
And
with you, G. I'm sorry, Chuck. I'd like to share this with you, GP. My daughter is dating, and I met. I like him, you know.
I feel for you, man.
Yeah, and here's what she said to me. She said, "Dad, his demeanor is just like yours."
Have mercy.
And
Mm.
and I didn't really know how to take that, you know, in the beginning. Yeah, go ahead, Nick. Go on. Because as much as people know me at work or know me here and there, my family know me as a quiet, and it may seem
Which family is this?
the other one, the other family, right? No, but when I'm home, I'm pensive. You know, I think a lot. And I don't do a lot of shouting at the kids and whatever. But when she said that to me, and I met him, I said to myself, "Is that how I am?" I'm grateful though that that's the part that she got, because and not got the part that was abusive or the part that could have been verbally abusive. I remember when I last shouted at her. I just bought this vehicle and she was drinking McDonald's juice and she was holding it, and I stepped on the brake, and you know, she held it, you know, those McDonald's cups, and she
Right,
pulled
yeah.
together, and the orange juice, which it's not juice, it's drink, you know, the one that
Yeah,
stains.
Yep.
It's
Not even
the one
drink,
that-
that's drank.
Yeah, that's right. The old, they don't sell it no more, but the old high C type ones.
Yeah.
It went all over the car, and I turned around at her and I said, "Sit back," and my daughter's face turned red, right? And I said to myself, I will never hurt her like that again. And which I've decided I will never speak like that to her again. Much less I wouldn't want I wouldn't want anybody talking
I
to
heard
her
that.
that way.
I heard
No,
that.
you didn't hear anything.
Right.
You didn't hear
Right.
anything. It's no one talking to her that way.
Right.
But could you imagine if she had that type of abuse? Because that way that I shouted at her was abuse, guys. And we have to recognize that. Let's stop
That's
sitting
right.
around saying shouting is not it. We could take out a kid's spirit by the way
That's
that we
right.
talk to them.
Absolutely.
And I'm grateful that she's got the good side of it and not got the received the bad side of it. And hopefully it doesn't manifest later on. Let's be realistic. It doesn't manifest later on. So abuse is, like you said, it's multifaceted, faceted,
absolutely.
but we have to find a way to find that calm and to find that discipline as parents, as teachers. Hold on, y'all, as preachers, as principals, as
That's
whatever it is that we do, we have to find that discipline to be able to say, hey,
And we need to pray about it.
Yeah.
We need to pray about it. There are times we need to get in our closets or wherever it is that's quiet and ask the Lord to work with our spirit and our attitude, because I can tell you story after story where children have heard words come from their parents and it changed their lives for the worse.
Sure.
Because they will remember those words. Oh, they'll recall the spankings, but they will remember those harsh words.
Yep.
So if you don't mix love with your discipline, it could end up being a train wreck as your child gets older.
Sure.
I mean, the Bible speaks of using the rod to correct your child. And when I think of the rod, I think of Jesus, because as a shepherd, you know, and I can't imagine Jesus as a shepherd taking his rod and saying, "Dad, gummit, you sheep, I'm going to show you how to mind if it's the last
Right,
thing
right.
I brought you in this world." I mean, and so the idea is to use your power and your authority to always ask yourself, is this coming from love? And can it be viewed by my child as corrective? Is it coming from love? Can it be viewed as corrective? Or am I teaching this child, don't make me mad at you? You know, and if you can keep that as a rubric, it will steer you from the pathway of abuse, because it's a slippery slope.
It is. It is.
Does not the representation of the rod and the staff? And
Yes.
does the prayer say they comfort me?
Yeah.
So
How about that?
Yeah.
Charles, we're the theologians. Okay, hold back on that.
Yeah. I started. I was going to start off this
He
thing
laid
by
that one
saying,
out there, though. didn't he?
I read somewhere in the
Oh,
Bible.
Lord. This is Bible.
Charles Spurgeon, right there.
Yeah,
Didn't
man.
the word say?
Chuck came out all nice with that, doesn't it?
Yeah, man. That was good stuff,
It was
Charles.
good. I like that, man. I like that.
Yeah, so-
I'm
I'd
sorry,
like to hear it from GP because I know we.
I'm sorry. I will say that again. Yeah, GP,
that was
please,
good, Chuck.
please
That was good.
chime in.
So I've really been enjoying this conversation. I'm taking notes. I'm gonna have my spanking strategy ready. But I'll say this for all parents.
Listen, GP, don't put like DEFCON charts on your wall. Like, all right, that's DEFCON 4.
Level 3 activate. But I'll say this for every parent: acknowledge that you are not perfect.
Yep.
Acknowledge that you are functioning with a level of dysfunction. You might not know it.
Mhm.
You might know about it. And so find a community that you can talk to, that you can vibe with, and also seek counseling. Even
Yeah.
if nothing is wrong,
That's right.
talk to somebody every once in a while because you'll be
That's right.
surprised what you learn about yourself and your family.
Mm,
And I'm glad.
good point.
I'm glad
But
you
just
said
remember
that.
this, and this is the most important part, GP, and that is when all of us grew up and we were raising our children, it was different. But your child will know the phone number to Child Protective Services.
And 911.
And
Yeah.
They can just ask Siri to call it.
I mean,
Yeah.
in our day, if they called the cop and say, they're beating me, the cop would say, good.
You can
Now
still
they're
talk
coming
to
to
me.
get
All
you.
right. Yeah.
They're coming
Hey,
to
but,
get
but what I would like to add on with this is what I've gotten from my parents. When you become grandparents, I really don't know those people. I have no
True.
clue
Mm.
to who those aliens are.
Wow.
GP, my son Jordan took a those everybody know the older people. Our older generation would keep coins and crystal glasses, all that type of stuff. And my son went and took all the crystal from the top of the stairs and started to toss them down the stairs. Just toss them all down the stairs. My father, got a broom and he swept it all up and put it in the garbage and just like, oh, you're so cute. One of those type of things.
And you're like,
Who are you and what did you do with my parents?
Wow.
This man is going straight to the kingdom. I mean, something's going on. The reason why I said that, GP, is because sometimes we have a wealth of information in our parents that knew their mistakes.
Right.
And if we could pull them to the side and say, Dad, Mom, help me here.
Mhm.
They're going to tell you the right thing. You're going to
Right.
get the right thing from them because they know if they could do this all over again, where would we go with that? How would I change that?
Mhm.
Again, if I wanted to land this plane, I would land this plane on love.
Right.
Even though we have a misconception of what love is, some of us do have a misconception of it. It's a learning basis. I want those who are now watching this to be able to say there are children out there that's abused. Let's be
Absolutely.
careful of how we approach
Every day.
every child.
That's right.
All of us are not the same parenting, so let's be careful of how we approach even the way other parents do certain things. It all comes down to perspective. But during this COVID time, it's a shaky period. It's something that we need to continue to think about, which really gives us mental we're exhausted mentally as far as it's concerned. But I want us to be able to hold on and think first, do some introspection before we respond to our children. And I think we'll get better results that way. And yes, you're right, Chuck. You're a Christian. We ought to be able to pray about this, and because that will also slow us down with a reaction. That's my word for today.
yeah. And, as we're wrapping up, when I was perusing the website, which I'll share here, which deals with preventing child abuse, which is childwelfare.gov. One of the things it pointed out is that prevention comes from community. So it deals with everyone looking out for every child. I know we talked a lot about managing our own households and making sure, we're managing things properly, but we also have to keep our eyes open when we're around. And sometimes like mind your business, we kind of have that mentality, but at the same time, we've been given this responsibility. We talked about how precious children are in God's eyes. So when we see children who may be in a situation of abuse, we have an obligation to do what we can to protect that child, even provide resources for that parent if possible. And that website I just showed, I'll put it back up, gives you a lot of resources on things that you can do should you see abuse happening, whether it's in the grocery store, as you reference, or maybe it's someone in your neighborhood or something that doesn't seem quite right. We do, just like we talked about all those other things, we have to speak up because we recognize the damage that can be done when children don't have an advocate, which is so heartbreaking to think that children could be in a home where they don't experience love, or they don't experience care, or so my final word would be, this is an obligation. This is something, even though it may not be happening in your home, your children are grown, we all still have an obligation to do what we can to help prevent it when we come across it. We are our brother's keeper, and we have a job to do.
Yeah, my final word would be, please understand what abuse is. Really understand what it is and try to live your life accordingly. Because sometimes you think you're doing your child a good when actually you're ruining them. And I might also just say that GP made an excellent recommendation in getting counseling and being aware. Take some parenting classes. Sometimes it's never too late to do that. But I think it's important for us to know what abuse is, so we will know how to be a good parent and seek counseling if we think we need it.
My final word is, and I know we all want to protect children, of course, but my final word is to create an atmosphere where every parent knows that every parent is a potential abuser, and that loving parents are prone to abuse as much as non-caring parents, and that it is okay to say, I need help. And we have to find redemptive pathways to helping parents rather than destroying families by saying, bad parent, now you don't get to be a parent anymore. Because then you damage child and parent and make things worse.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Well, this has been I don't know, I feel kind of somber right now.
It's been a heavy discussion.
Yeah, you think about kids, it's just, that weighs heavy on heart. But as you're listening, watching this, if you have some thoughts or some comments that you want us to reference in a future show, feel free to email us, upset@acsd.com. Of course, you can also leave a comment in the chat if you're watching on Facebook Live, or if you're watching on our YouTube. Please, we love to hear what you think about these topics that we're discussing and get your opinion. Let us know if you believe in spanking, or you think we're a little bit more progressive now. We love to hear your thoughts on all of what we discussed today. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Once again, it's been a great conversation. We hope just talking about it will help us be a little bit more intentional about it. And as always, it's been great upsetting this fruit basket with all of you.
Always
a pleasure.
All right.